could never cover everything about these in one talk or in multiple talks as well. So I'll just try and summarize, or I'd say try and present to you some of the things that we have been doing. So this is most of the things that I'll be presenting. This has been done along with a group of researchers, along with a group of colleagues and my students who work with me on these. And this sort of gives you the overview of what to expect in this talk. So there'll be two broad sections to this. One is what I call social NLP. It's an ambiguous phrase. It means a lot of things. But in this case here, I would mean any processing engine, any natural language processing system that sort of tries to process the social, as take into consideration the social aspects of language as well by processing those. And also the second broad area would be multilingual NLP, which essentially means we try to bring in as many languages as possible and try to process them together with each other, taking information from each other. All right. So the problems, uh, these are the general problems that the field of NLP, also the field of AI, artificial intelligence, faces, and the two big issues at this point of time uh, in NLP is developing those technologies which are socially aware, which are aware of the social surroundings, about the cultural surroundings in which they are being deployed, and they need to be aware of the context in which they are being deployed. And the second big problem is to to have some kind of technology, not just the socially aware one, but the even the basic technologies for all the language and varieties on earth. Right, so the first field that we talk about, the socially aware systems, is called broadly called computational sociolinguistics, which is an important component of what's called artificial social intelligence within the field of artificial intelligence. The second one is obviously it relates to the diversity of languages. Also, vis-a-vis that, there is this homogeneity of technologies. So in the sense that we'll see this, that there are very, very few languages which have technologies available for them. And you know this from your experience as well, that we don't have what we call language technologies for most of the languages that people speak across the globe. It's not just an Indian problem, it's a global issue, the lack of diversity. All right, so let's start with the first problem, the social NLP problem. This was a report that was published in 2017, if I'm not wrong. And this essentially shows the state of the NLP systems, of the natural language processing systems that they are currently in. And well, the real thing to look at is at the color of these boxes. So and then you have those tasks parallel to those. So the boxes which are green, those are the ones where the AI systems, the general AI systems, they perform really well. The ones in the yellow, they are at median level. They perform in certain context, but they are not able to do very well. The red ones are the ones which we still do not have a good solution for those problems. So if you look at the NLP block, there are two problems, that of natural language generation and natural language understanding. We see that we are still none of these are green. In fact, for natural language understanding, it's still red. So we do not really have a good system for any language. So this is not about a specific language. This is about a problem in general. It's not that systems understand English very well or Hindi very well and not other languages, but in general, they don't understand. The block just below that is also important, because that's where the social and emotional capabilities of the systems uh, are expected. So they're expected to be in green, but they're not. So everything there is all red. There are other problems as well, for example logical reasoning, or generating novel patterns. So those are the kinds of, or creativity. So those are the kinds of problems where systems really don't perform like a human, or as well as a human. There is also a timeline associated with this. So the report predicts that we will reach the top quartile, which means it will become a green marked thing, uh, till about 2070, 2075 for the natural language understanding, and similar for natural language generation as well. So that's the prediction. It may not be necessarily become true by then. That's the best case scenario at this point of time. So we are not going to have systems which are going to perform very well with natural language understanding until 2070. Now, this was based on the research that has been done till now and the pace at which it is progressing. The challenge is to reduce that timeline, to bring that earlier than it is predicted. So not wait till 2070 to achieve that, but to do it before, or at least try to do it before. Right. So the two things that I'll be presenting in this talk, and uh, they are not. I won't say that they'll bring the systems in the top quartile, but uh, these are the systems that sort of initiate some research into uh, systems which are able to sense the emotions and the social surroundings. So so of course there are other applications. I'll be talking about aggression and hate speech, uh, which I've been working on for some time now, and the second one is propaganda and fake news. Mainly propaganda, not much of fake news, but these two are very, very related. Of course, there are other systems which are really which do not need to work for uh, something which is as negative as aggression or propaganda. So it has been there have been systems that developed for, say, disaster relief. One of the simplest tasks in disaster relief is to match the request and the offer. So requests are the ones that people need, offers are the people who are giving something. And so it turns out that in the disaster scenario, this matching becomes a huge problem, because if we need something, we really don't know where to go, and how to get those things. Also, there are people who really want to help, they don't know how to help. So this one essentially means if people post on social media, say on Twitter or on Facebook, then the systems could automatically crawl through all of that data, and they try and match people who have matching requests and offers. So things like that. We won't be discussing that though in much detail. Let's start with the first application about aggression and hate speech. So this I'll try and do in some detail, and hopefully it will still be uh, intelligible. All right, so this is a part of our new project, the comma project, and the deliverables include a benchmark multilingual data set that is annotated with information about misogyny and communalism. So those are the comma stands for uh, communal and misogynist aggression. So essentially, we're trying to automatically identify misogyny and communalism on social media, and then of course try and handle. So these are some of the biggest problems that social media today is facing. Uh, the idea of the project is to come up with some identification system which could identify this with some amount of accuracy, some reasonable amount of accuracy. All right. So verbal aggression, we don't really have a final definition for this, but this is our working definition at this point of time. Any kind of linguistic behavior which intends to damage the social identity of the target person. It could also potentially cause psychological harm to the victim, and everything that comes. That's a very broad way of defining verbal aggression, but that's what we are working with at this point of time. We divide this into two kinds based on what kind of linguistic structures are being employed for being aggressive. So covert aggression would, the name itself is self-explanatory. So they do not employ explicit linguistic structures. So you cannot pinpoint there that these are the structures that's making it aggressive. Uh, a lot of instances would be satirical comments and things like that, which are aggressive. Overt aggression is where uh, you could pinpoint the structures, which includes the prosody, the syntactic structures, lexical items, etc. We have a more detailed definition of what we mean by gendered aggression or misogynistic aggression, and we are clubbing together the two terms for now. We'll see if there will be a need to distinguish between the two. At this point of time, we are clubbing together. We fully understand that these two are not exactly the same thing, but for now it works by clubbing together the two. Right. So all those cases of verbal aggression where the aggression is aimed towards the stereotypical gender roles of the victim as well as the aggressor, or anything which is aggressive by referring to one's sexuality, sexual orientation. It could also be aimed towards the victim because of their gender, by referring to their gender, and gender here is non-binary. So throughout this, whenever we talk about gender, it could so our hypothesis is it could be potentially hundreds of uh, genders that we could talk about. So so we are not putting it in a binary sense there. Also there could be aggression because somebody fulfills or gender roles assigned to somebody else, so or do not fulfill the gender roles assigned to them. Right, so I'll not read out the examples for any of these. You could go through those. So also these examples that there are not many, but all the examples these are taken from the corpus which was collected from Facebook and YouTube, also Twitter. So it's what's written in public space by the people. These are not the constructed examples. All right, so I'll skip the theoretical part and I'll come back to this. Uh, if I'll see that there is a need to explain the the theoretical framework in which we were. Broadly speaking, enregisterment and the idea of text defaults, these are enregisterment is essentially a socio-historical process which was uh, which sort of decides uh, some kind of register formation. We all know about register, and enregisterment essentially says that registers are not fixed, they are continuously in flux, they are continuously being formed. And what our hypothesis is that every kind of language, so aggressive language, aggression is one of the registers, which would mean that it will have its own kind of language and its own kind of um, features which we could hopefully use for automatically identifying aggression. All right, so the study that I'll be discussing is carried out using corpus-based methods. We have a corpus of YouTube comments, and we got that annotated with information about aggression and misogyny. And then we used it for quantitative study to look at the extent and nature of overlap between the two. So even though right in the beginning I said that misogyny is a subtype of aggression, and we were looking for empirical evidence to show that it actually is a subtype of aggression. That's the study that I'll be discussing. And also we look at how these text default readings, what's called, so which essentially is register formation. These are acquired by certain lexical items and phrases over a very short period of time in social media. Right, so we looked at different kinds of videos, so comments on those videos. We didn't analyze the video themselves, we analyzed the comments on the videos. So, and we were looking for those kinds of video where we think that there is a higher probability of getting misogynous data. So which included videos related to certain national policies and legislation that has come out in the recent times. So section 377, 375, and then all the debates about false rape cases, anti-dowry debates as well. There are certain news coverage of violent crimes, different rape cases, debates on depiction of misogyny in popular culture. I think we all at least I am very well So I think that we all are aware of the debates around Kabir Singh and Thappad, and how the two films fare, and how they sort of uh, they could be placed at opposite ends of a spectrum. Also, debates related to behavior of women, public behavior of women, or even some of the general socio-political commentaries by women. And it turns out that if people don't agree to the politics of women, the attack there is also gendered. So it's not so in the case of men. If you don't uh, agree with their politics, you attack their politics. But in case of women, you also attack. The attack is based on the gender. So that was thought process of collecting the data. Since we were looking at both Hindi and Bangla, also English, we collected data for all of these languages. This one just shows proportion of the data in each of the language. Turns out we also have a substantial proportion of Bangladeshi Bangla in the data set, which we have not yet analyzed. But now that it's there in the data set, hopefully we'll manage to analyze that as well. So we have a huge amount of English data, but also a substantial amount of Hindi and Bangla, which we have used for this study. Uh, uh, the central part of this study was data annotation process. So we had four annotators. Two were speakers of Bangla, and the other two, they did not speak Bangla. So everybody spoke Hindi and English. These were all linguistics students, and most importantly, all the annotators in our group, they have a centrist or left-leaning political ideology. And this becomes significant when you look at what is considered misogynist and what is not. We do try to neutralize those effects in the course of annotation, but there is only so much that could be done. Right. So initially, in the annotation process, two annotators annotate the same comment for being uh, gendered or not gendered. And then if there is a disagreement, then we attempt to resolve that through discussion. That also helps us in understanding what the other person is thinking as misogynist. And this decision has been taken because of our experience with these kinds of annotation in the earlier task as well. Now, we carried out an experiment. These are called Inter-Annotator Agreement experiment, which essentially shows how much of uh, how much of agreement there is among the annotators, which kind of shows the reliability of the whole annotation process. And initially, it turns out that the agreement was pretty low, very, very low. So Krippendorf's kappa uh, is it's considered a conservative kappa, but even then 0.27 agreement score is pretty low. It's not percentage, so percentage of agreement is much higher, but Krippendorf's kappa essentially takes agreement by chance as well into account. And so it's a more robust score. And so it was low. And what we wanted was to improve this, because a low agreement scores signals a low reliability. Whatever the results that data would give us, that becomes problematic because of a low inter-annotator agreement. Also, later we face a lot of problems in system development. And so one possible solution, and this is backed by our enregisterment, the theoretical notion, also the notions, the other notions such as that of conventionalization. And so uh, we sort of try to intervene in all of this, and a continuous discussion and sharing was part of the problem solving process. So we try and understand what people are, how they are deciding on what they are deciding. We try to reason with each other, and we try to arrive at an amicable solution. The guidelines finally for the task, the annotation task, was framed based on these points of disagreement where annotators disagreed, and we tried to resolve those, and the resolutions were part of the uh, final guidelines, so that annotators could get back to those when they're annotating, when they're confused what to do and what to mark and what not to mark. Also, we didn't really want to be very strict with their decision making process. We wanted this to be annotated by the annotators. We didn't want to give a strict guideline, the kind of guideline that we give for, say, part of a speech tagging, where you could give the test. For pragmatic judgment task, you really cannot give a test, so it's their perception, which we need to understand. And so essentially the final guidelines contains a lot of these examples and these instances people didn't agree. So some of the samples would include things like attack against women, where gendered. So the guideline says that gender does not mean any attack against women. It will be gendered only when the attack is because of someone being a woman. So I think I read today itself. I read a news about a very similar judgment by Supreme Court, not with in relation to women, but in relation to SCST Act. I think where they said that if the attack is not, if somebody is not being attacked because of their SCST status, then it cannot be considered under that act. So something very similar to that, and prior to that judgment, it has to be because of someone being a woman. So this example, the one here, it's translated from Hindi, uh, but this one shows that it's not a gendered attack, even though it's against a woman. The second problem was where, in a lot of cases of discussion around gender, the victims are attacked. So, victims are blamed for what is being done to them. Those cases, lot of annotators missed those cases. And but after the discussions, it turned out that we need to keep an eye for victim blaming, and they have to be marked gendered if the victims are the ones that are being blamed. Right, so the whole guideline is there on the uh, website if you are interested, and if you have comments on that, you could send us back in. The project is still on, it's not finished. So uh, any suggestions, comments on those guidelines would be really helpful for us. Now, of course, after these guidelines, as you could see, Krippendorf's uh, alpha shoots up 0.75, and that's considered a very good agreement score, uh, given that we are using Krippendorf's alpha, and it's also the fact that it's a pragmatic annotation task. So and we used it with 4 annotators. So that sort of we froze the guideline, and we started the annotation process. So finally, what we got was approximately 6,000 comments from YouTube from for each of the three languages, Bengali, Hindi, and English. Bengali here is only Indian Bengali, not Bangladeshi Bangla. Right. So, and that sort of, those numbers are the uh, numbers for each of the categories. So NAG, CAG, and OAG are the three categories of aggression. So overt aggression, covert aggression, and non-aggressive. And NGen is non-gendered, and Gen is gendered. So, and those, so the same comments were marked for both the categories, aggression and misogyny. Then we looked at some of the interactions, some of the proportions in the data set. And it turns out that Hindi and Bangla has, so if we look at the aggression, Hindi and Bangla is almost 50%, a little less than 50% is aggressive. English, it's much, much lower. And there are, we have some hypotheses why English is, English comments are much less aggressive. And there's some prior studies which shows that when people are being aggressive or being abusive, they switch to their mother tongue. So in English, uh, people when abusing, they don't use the second language or the foreign language for that. So that could be one of the reasons why when people are speaking English, they are mostly non-aggressive. But still, we have quite a good number of aggressive comments in English as well. Also, these all will be, we expect that these are all Indian English comments, not uh, the British or the American English. So because the videos are the Indian videos, and they're kind of mixed, so comments are in all kinds of languages, so including English. If we look at misogyny, uh, of course, it's much lower than uh, the lower than aggression, and it's around in 15% of cases, both Hindi and Bangla, that the comments are misogynist, which is still, we think, is quite high. So these were, even though we were looking for uh, videos that might produce misogynist reaction, we didn't expect this to be this high, because the comments are randomly chosen, right, for the study. All right, if we look at the co-occurrence, and that was one of the things that we wanted to explore. So we'll see that for misogyny and aggression, a huge number of misogynous comments, so more than 95% for Hindi, almost 90% for Bangla. The ones that are misogynous are also aggressive, right? So of course, non-misogynous comments are also aggressive, but not in as high proportion as the case of misogynous ones. And this was one of the motivations that we continue keeping misogyny as a sub category of aggression. We think that probably it could be one kind of aggression, misogyny, but we also need to do more with the other kinds of aggression and see how those perform to, really freeze it. We also had some uh, we try to understand how the language is being used, and we come out with some statistical properties of the comments. So the general trends, will leave apart the numbers. The general trend will look at, say, the first group of bars here. So covertly aggressive comments are the longest, and you will see that these hold across languages. The yellow bar is the covert aggression one. It holds across languages, and it will hold throughout different measures that will take for the length of the comment. So this is average number of utterances, average number of tokens. We'll also look at average number of characters. So in general, covertly aggressive comments are the longest, and the non-aggressive comments are the shortest ones. In case of gendered and non-gendered, gendered comments are longer than non-gendered ones. So in Bangla, that difference in length is not that prominent. In English, it's very prominent. But the trend remains that the gendered ones across these three languages are longer. So people write more if they are being covertly aggressive or if they are being gendered. All right, so everything, all of this, you will see that the same pattern continues. The average tokens per comment or average characters per comment, no matter what measure of length we take, the pattern continues to be same. All right, so what then we try and understand, we will try to also look at some of the phrases and some of the words that are mostly aggressive and mostly misogynous, and we try to say that those are the typical features of a misogyny register or of an aggression register. And we looked at the frequency of occurrence of those different words and phrases, so all the words and phrases essentially. So what we looked at was what's called unit to 4 grams. So unigram is a single word, bigram is two continuous word, each of the two continuous words in the corpus, and 4 grams would be each of the four continuous words, which we think is good enough for finding out the regularly occurring phrases in the corpus. And what we got is these are some of the most frequently occurring phrases and words in the corpus, right? So these are for Hindi and Bangla corpus. We did this frequency calculation separately, not together, for the two languages. And I'm not saying that these are the only ones that are there, but so we could make a list of top 50, top 100 words on phrases in the corpus, but these are the most frequent ones that we got there. And we think that probably these are the ones that are enregistered for aggressive misogynous effects in Hindi and Bangla, at least for this data set. And of course we need a larger data set for this. Now, given this, with all of this information, and we try and model this into a computational model and try and identify aggression. So prior to this study, 2 years before this, we had conducted with another data set a shared task. Uh, so shared task essentially means that we give the data set and multiple teams. So for this one, 30 teams participated, and they develop a system for automatic identification. All of the teams, they develop on their own. So each team develop their own system, and then we compare the results, we compare the methods and see which methods work best, and things like that. We also get to know that so we kind of benchmark the data set itself, and we say that this is the best that we achieve. Yeah. Okay, so for that task in 2018, where the annotations and things were not as rigorous, and we were working on a very tight deadline and things like that, the F score comes to zero point 0.6 for the aggression identification task, for Hindi and English both. We didn't have a misogyny thing at that point of time. This year, with all of this, we conducted a second shared task. Uh, this time, the best team got an F score of above 0.80. So what this essentially shows is that the performance have definitely improved, and there is some improvement in the techniques as well. There is some change in the techniques as well. But it's not just the technique or the approach or the methodology of the system development. It also the data set itself, which has led to a better performance. So data set is better annotated, so to say, and we are able to make some distinctions in between the data set. Now, these scores are these are the three teams for which the scores are reported here, and we could see that for Bangla 0.82, zero point 0.8, and 0.780, those are the top three scores of the top three teams, and similarly for English and Hindi. It's not necessarily that the same team would get the best score in each language. So the different approaches work different ways for different languages. Now, for misogyny, we get even better. One reason being it's a two-class classification task. The other one is a three-class. So it has to distinguish between three classes. Here it has to distinguish between two classes. And the scores are much better. Now, what we try and do is we along with those teams that develop, we try and use our analysis, the knowledge that we gain from our analysis of the data set, and we try and build our own system. Now we use a much simpler system here. So if you look at the approach, people are using BERT and Roberta. So these are expected to perform better than the SVM. So we use a system which is not as sophisticated as those, but it's still uh, the takeaway is that we still manage to get the scores which are very similar to the scores that those teams got. In fact, in some cases, we get the scores which are better than the sophisticated techniques that the other teams are using. So, of course, our so every technique and every approach has its own limitations, and if we use BERT or Roberta, they take longer to train, and we cannot explicitly uh, feed in the features of our linguistic analysis, while SVMs allow for that. So that's the reason why we use SVM, and it takes much smaller time to train. It's a much lighter system. So in that situation, the simple rule applies that if two uh, systems perform equally well, then the simpler system is the better system, right? So also in some cases, so in English aggression, uh, uh, we just got a perfect score, so we beat everyone in that, right? So that was one of the studies that it's a preliminary study. It's not really a final study, so we are still working with the data set and things like that, but it does show up some of the things that it's uh, an overwhelming majority of misogynist comments are also aggressive. Also that aggressive and misogynist comments are longer than their non-aggressive and non-misogynist parts, and among those, covert aggressive are the ones which are the longest. And the system that we develop, it turns out that linguistic studies and linguistic features actually help in improving the systems quite a bit. All right, so now the second application. Now I'll quickly move through this because I think how much time do I have? 15 minutes?
No, Ritesh, you have enough time. You have time till 6:15.
Oh, I have lots of time then. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then I'll move through this in the normal pace. The second application is the propaganda and misinformation identification, and uh, this one is so mainly we started with trying to identify the the linguistic features of fake news. So what are the first question is, are there specific linguistic features that we could come for fake news? Then we moved back from that, and we started exploring this very interesting literature on propaganda. So and we came across the fact that propaganda is actually a matter of uh, academic study for long, and for at least 100 years. uh, and people have tried to theorize propaganda in very systematic ways. So Postman 1976, a very simple definition, but quite powerful, says that it's the use, and it's the linguistic definition that we are talking about. So propaganda is a study both in the media studies and in linguistics. So Postman is a linguistic perspective. It says that it's that kind of language use which is designed to evoke a specific kind of response from its readers or hearer, a very broad definition. And then he goes on to say that it's generally aimed towards fooling people and influencing public opinion. A more recent perspective, the media studies perspective, and I would say a rather radical perspective, it simply says that any mass media is not trying to provide you with factual information, but okay, it's just to gaslight and propagandize them into subservience and support for elite positions. It's a very, as you could say, it's a very communist position, and it's a I would not say that that's a very fair position to take, but that's one of the extremes in which propaganda is understood. Of course, uh, parts of this you could probably agree with that. So we try and arrive at our own understanding of propaganda and what it is, and how it correlates with fake news. So I won't be talking a lot about how it correlates with fake news. We don't have any numbers charts to show for that at this point of time. But I have a definition which I think is quite exhaustive. So it's the practice of either backgrounding, marginalizing, and filtering the uncomfortable, disturbing facts by foregrounding the less uncomfortable or completely false facts. That's one. That could be one kind of propaganda. The other could be propaganda where you foreground uncomfortable facts by resorting to unnecessary comparison with other uncomfortable, disturbing facts. So. No, the idea of both of these is to mislead people into believing a specific kind of narrative, and it could be manifested and implemented via various methods. Use of specific kinds of language is one such method, right? And they essentially the aim is still to evoke highly emotional reaction. The broad theoretical framework that we work in is still that of enregisterment. So we believe that propaganda uh, it could be thought of as one of the registers which has its own linguistic features. Right. So there are what we call friends of propaganda, and uh, so these are important components of the propaganda ecosystem. So fake narratives or misinformation are part of the propaganda ecosystem, and also hyperpartisanship. These are extremely one-sided narratives. You could see a lot of these instances in uh, Indian media these days, especially television media. So these all together aim to push forward uh, a certain narrative. Right. So Herman and Chomsky, it's the same Chomsky, but it's a very different kind of model which they propose for propaganda, and they call it propaganda model. Is probably one of the uh, most well-known and well-received models of propaganda. And they say that there are five filters that all events pass through before reaching the TV screen. So they model it in the context of the TV news. These filters, they determine which events actually are newsworthy and which are not, and essentially by way of doing that they lock the parameters of discourse. So everything is not being discussed on the TV channel. So these five filters are uh, uh, so the two filters that are on this slide, size and advertising, these are the essentially economic filters. So most of the popular and successful media houses, they are dominated by big corporations or by wealthy people and governments. So it's expected that they would run those news which favor the big corporations, and most of the times also they need these channels or any media organization, news outlet, they need a large part of a large amount of money to run, and those are generated by advertisements which are again borne by rich and powerful or by the government. So depending on the country, depending on the situation, uh, so in the US it's the big corporations, in a place like China it's the government which controls all of this. All right, the three other filters, sourcing. Generally, people rely on information provided by government, big businesses, and other official experts. So a lot of times we hear this statement that, so if there is an accident, there is a government official figure of how many people died. COVID is the recent example. So there is a government figure of how many people died, and then there is a non-government figure, a real figure, which people think uh, would be the so those kinds of facts. So you go back to the government data and or the data released by the big businesses to provide your inputs in the news. You get, ultimately you end up getting those figures even though they may not be very accurate. The two other filters are flack and ideology. So if certain media houses, they end up running news which is not favorable to the organizations or to the governments, then there are negative responses, smear campaigns, there are lawsuits against media, against public intellectuals. Also, there are certain kinds of debates which are filtered out by ideology. Remember, this model was proposed in 1988, and this was mostly in the context of the US, the way US media works. However, you could, of course, probably, may not be obvious for everyone, but probably you could figure out the similarity with the Indian situation almost 30 years after so more than 30 years after the publication of this model. Right. So what we try and do is take this model as the theoretical grounding for the study. So as the explanation for why certain kinds of things happen, certain kinds of news are out there on the news channels or out there in the newspapers, and certain other kinds do not really make that kind of noise. So that kind of gives us a way of philosophizing the things, but it doesn't give us a way of recognizing things. Now, in order to recognize whether something is propaganda or not, and there is a lot of historical material on this, on how to recognize propaganda. Now, those are not for recognizing it automatically, those are for how could humans. So propaganda is meant not to be recognized. If it's recognized, it fails. So there was lots of effort on how humans could recognize it. And at this point of time, we are talking about not just humans, but also how machines could recognize it. And probably also with the hope that it might be a little easier for machines to identify the patterns and recognize the propaganda. And the most reliable way, of course, is to look out the language. So within linguistics and within rhetorics, there have been lots of devices which has been proposed, which are called propaganda devices. And the number of these propaganda devices vary in literature from 7 to more than 50. The one of the challenges was, of course, to come to a good set of the devices that we could probably again model and try and recognize based on those. So there's a very recent work at QCRI, Qatar Computing Research Institute, and they have worked on propaganda a lot, English mostly, for English news media. And they came up with these 18 logical fallacies and rhetorical devices and different kinds of emotional language, which could be called propaganda devices. So it includes things like loaded language, red herring, whataboutism, flag waving. So there are these different kinds of devices which are being used. So I really don't in these slides I don't have the detailed examples, but if you would want, I could uh, give you some of the examples maybe after the talk. It's so of what these things mean. Or right. So what we did then was I started collecting data from some of the major Hindi media outlets, and look at how their news and how their articles are structured, and what kind of devices they are using. Just a very initial exploratory kind of a study. And we got this 500 articles from 10 uh, not essentially newspapers but general media outlets. So the choice is random to a certain extent, in the sense that ease of getting the data was one of the factors that resulted in this list of newspaper and magazines. But we were very certain that we want data from both what's called the mainstream media and what could be considered a very obviously biased media. So that would include mouthpieces of political parties and things like that. So as you could see, the top five are what we call, so Media Vigil is a fact checking site, kind of, and then the top four, of course, are the mainstream media that we know of, the newspapers that we think are hopefully unbiased, and the last five are actually mouthpiece of one or the other political party. uh, uh, so there could be some obvious omissions here. One of the reasons being that some of the political parties, especially, and we really wanted to get a more balanced data set, which includes articles from uh, those published by the communist parties and the Congress, but unfortunately they publish only in English, and that explains a lot of things. They don't have English Hindi publication, and so we couldn't include this. And or probably we didn't, if there is a Hindi publication, then you could, if you know of something, then you could point me towards that, and we would include those in our data set as well. That's our final, not final, but an intermediate data set of 500 articles. Okay, so again, a similar kind of a statistical study, and we find that more than 52% of articles uh, across these employ at least one propaganda technique out of those 18. And in case of mainstream media, this is lower at 43%. In case of the biased media outlets, it's in over 61% of articles. Now, if we look at the proportion of uh, propaganda and non-propaganda articles across these different newspapers, you could see that newspapers like Dainik Jagran, Dainik Bhaskar. Dainik Jagran is 72% non. So whatever articles we collected, they were very randomly selected, and in 72% of articles, not a single propaganda device is used. But what is striking is that in each of these newspapers, and uh, which also we kind of expected, some kind of in some of the articles, at least in one fourth of the articles, some kind of propaganda device is being used. It also, there are some surprises here. So for example, Samna, we didn't expect that this will be 76% non-propaganda, but probably our sampling was something off, or probably they don't use these devices so much uh, as some of the other ones. So for example, Amar Ujala, it's almost more than 50% of articles use one or the other propaganda device. So the results are not what we expected, but these are what we got, at least at this point of time. This one shows the proportion of each of those devices in each of these newspapers. So you could see, for a newspaper like Dainik Jagran, loaded language is what they mostly use a lot of times. So almost 75% of time they use loaded language. So this is from among those articles which use one or the other kind of propaganda device. Right. So Dainik Bhaskar, it's repetition. For some nights, a combination of loaded language and repetition, and different kinds of for these which are Panjan or TFI posts, they use name calling or labeling. So even though they use propaganda, we see that each of these different media outlets, they use different kinds of propaganda device. It's not the same kind of propaganda device that they are using. Right. So, oh, I made a mistake in explaining. So this one, Danik Bhaskar and Samna, this is flag waving, the orange ones, not repetition. But anyway, the point is that they are using different kinds of devices. Now, we didn't have a huge data set, but still we try and run a simple experiment and see how well could this be identified automatically. And very similar experimental setup. It's a two-class classification, so non-propaganda and propaganda. That was the first task that we try and do. And we got a pretty good score of 74.5, so almost 75 F1 score. So that's almost 75% accurate. So in 75% of cases, the system is able to recognize propaganda, which is not very bad, and but we need to run some human experiments as well to see. So there was no Inter-Annotator Agreement here, so, and we don't know how much humans agree and things like that, and how much humans are able to detect propaganda. So we don't have those figures, but those figures will put this into perspective. But independent of all of that, it's not a very bad result. The bad result is this one. So this is not task one, this is task two, where we do the we try to identify the devices, the propaganda devices, and we use a more sophisticated system. So it's a fine-tuned multilingual BERT that we are using, and we trained it for standard 15 epochs. Good learning rate. We experimented with all of this, and these were the best hyperparameters, so the training parameters that we used. And F1 scores after all of this is 22.58. It's not able to get the correct device in even in one-fourth of the cases. So we need to rethink about this. Also, it's not so the second thing is that it's not very disheartening, because one of the reasons is that it's a 18 class classification task. We don't have huge amount of data. So dividing up, so we need larger amount of data to bump this up uh, for a huge classification task like this. But we also need to think of more ways of improving this. Right, so the whole idea is that it's a complex and challenging task, and the challenge that we talked about right in the beginning, that uh, social NLP is hard. So these are some of the best techniques that we have, that we are using here for developing these systems. The techniques that we have as of at this point of time, those techniques work really well for some of the tasks, but it's still some of the tasks like identifying propaganda or its devices, they don't really work that well. Of course, we don't still have the linguistic features. So I think one of my students, Shyam, he's working on this for his MPhil dissertation, and we'll have some more insights into the linguistic features, and also we might have a better system by the end of his MPhil. Okay, so that was it of social NLP. Now the third and the last part of the talk will talk a little bit about the multilingual NLP problem. So this is not something which is directly related to use of language in society, but it's of more it relates to a more societal phenomena, the societal phenomena of multilingualism. So how do we make the whole NLP enterprise is scalable, so that we are able to develop not the kind of systems that I just talked about, but the basic technologies, the very basics of NLP. uh, this was a very fascinating study published this year itself in ACL, and which talks about the state of different languages in NLP, and it looks at some of the major NLP conferences and how which languages are represented and what kinds of applications are being developed, how much of applications are being developed, and they divide these languages into 6 categories. And so the winners, and you could see a dot right here at the top, which you could say is English. It's very obvious. So English is way ahead of all the other languages in terms of different kinds of resources and technologies that they have. But then there are other languages as well which are in the winners category, but there are underdogs which have very good amount of resources, and they could very quickly develop new technologies. Rising stars are the ones uh, which have unannotated data, which have raw data which is being used online, and so we could quickly get raw data. And at this point of time, we have, so I talked about this multilingual BERT and these technologies. They essentially require that you pre-train the system on huge amount of raw data, and then even a small amount of annotated data could actually perform very well when we fine tune those pre-trained systems. So rising stars are the ones which have huge amount of raw data. Hopefuls are the ones which are uh, so rising stars and hopefuls would include lots of our official languages. The Probably except Hindi, none of the languages would be in the underdogs. We don't have winners in India. So rising stars and hopefuls are the ones which cover most of the official languages. There are 22 official languages of India, and scraping bys are some of the non-official languages, non-scheduled languages, and languages like Bhojpuri or Maghi, which for which we have some data, some group working, but it still needs a lot of work and resources to really achieve some reasonable amount of technology. Left behinds are mostly the endangered languages and most of the non-scheduled languages, and those kinds of languages which are termed others in the census, so clubbed together. So they unfortunately still do not have anything. So left behinds do not have resource, do not have technology, and they are zero resource languages. All right, so that is a problem. Now the problem becomes apparent with this table. So, and this is not just for India. So this was a global study, and we see that the winners, we only have 7 languages for which we could say that they have technologies, language technologies, are uh, which are good and which is usable, which puts them at the forefront of the technology revolution. And more than 88% of the world's languages, and you'll see that this doesn't, the sample doesn't include uh, the 6,000 or 7,000 languages that we talk about. So these are the languages, you know so the languages which are uh, there in the conference, they are talked about, but in the conference papers, but they do not have anything substantial yet. So more than 88%. So all the other languages, they are like in the negative category. All the languages that are below zero, they are not even mentioned in any of the papers published in these major NLP conferences over the last 50 years or so. Okay, so for 88% of languages, we don't have any resource to talk about. And so if we look at the last 3 ones, so uh, so the rising stars and the underdogs and the winners, so that comes to about 6% of the languages of the world, which has for which there is a possibility that we'll have reasonable uh, technologies in the next few years, right? So now, what could we do about it? That's the thing. So this is not a problem which could be solved automatically or by building better systems. What we need is basic system. What we need is some resources, and we are trying to do some of those things by working in those languages. So as of now, we have 5 languages that we are working on: Maghi, Bhojpuri, Avdi, Braj, Bhasha, and Bunel. These are all uh, languages of Hindi belt, and of course there are much more languages that needs to be worked on. So essentially what we are trying to do is this bare minimum, what we call bare minimums resource and technology that we are trying to build for these languages. So for most of these, for all of these, we have some raw text corpus already. We are trying to also build parallel corpus, so mostly English to these languages or these languages to English parallel corpus, part of a speech annotated corpus, morphological feature annotated corpus, also a tree bank. And basic technologies will include really basic ones, part of a speech tagger, morph analyzers, lemmatizers, spell and grammar checkers, empty systems, and things like that. And we try and leverage the existing technologies as much as we can for building technologies for these languages. So for most of these languages, they are not present online. They don't have huge amount of data available, but if they have, then we crawl the blogs and the social media platforms for the data. If they don't, we try and visit the field, get the text from them, we scan, we OCR. So all of these, fortunately at this point of time, they are written in Devanagari, so we use the Hindi OCR systems, and which is pretty good, which works pretty well with these languages as well. And then we do a proofreading round, and that's our raw data. For annotation, we try to annotate the whole thing with part of speech thing, part of speech tags, morphological features, as well as the syntactic relationships. So we use very consciously we use tag sets offered by two projects, Universal Dependencies and Unimorph. These are the two frameworks. They claim that these are the universal tag sets, and these are the universal features that they're talking about. And but whether or not they are true, that's not the point. The point is that a huge number of languages are already tagged using these frameworks, which means that one, it allows for systematic comparison across languages. So we could use actually typological and aerial features in the computational systems, especially the ones where uh, the data set is very low, it's not very high. Also, we could reap the advantages of what's known as transfer learning. So we train a system on a very well, so especially when the languages are closely related, they share a lot of lexicon and things like that. So in those cases, if we train on a well-resourced language like say Hindi, then we could use that for building reasonably good systems for low-resource languages. And this is called transfer learning. And so we want to reap those advantages as well, and that's the reason why we tag using this. And syntactic relations are of course dependency grammar framework, again within the universal dependencies project that they provide. Now, for technology development, we largely do data-driven machine learning approaches. For all of this, we use algorithms which are known to work with low data, so things like SVM or naive based. And for empty systems, for machine translation, we generally use phrase-based and factor-based systems. We don't use rule-based systems this point of time, even though lots of people would say that rule-based systems work better with no resource or low resource. But it turns out that developing rules probably is much more time-taking, and it's much more prone to certain kind of errors than developing the data set itself. So if we could arrive at a reasonable amount of data set, then we could train the systems, we could figure out the errors, and then in solving those errors, we could use rules as a post-processing step. We also, at this point, as I said, we're also exploring transfer learning for classification tasks. So these transformer based models, uh, and we have these models for last 1.5 years, so it's not that these are around for a very long time. We are using these trying to use these models and experiment with those, and develop technologies with less data. Also, there is a technique called zero shot learning for MT, where even if the parallel sentences are less, not very huge in number, if we could give huge amount of monolingual data for the target language, the systems could actually perform well. All right, so what all do we have till now? I'll just breeze through this because these are just numbers. And so essentially Maghi and Bhojpuri, for these two we have uh, these two are the best among these worst languages. So not the languages are the worst, it's that the resources for them are the worst stage. So quite a bit of everything. And uh, we are actively working on this. Bhojpuri is still better than slightly better than Maghi, but almost at the same stage as. And we have geostag, morph features, parallel corpus, tree bank, everything for these two languages. Braj Bhasha, we have started working on this, and morph features we still don't have, but we have just started annotating morph features. So maybe 100 sentences or something like that is done. Uh, uh, and besides that we have tree bank. So it's not the finalized tree banks, but almost final stage. So these are kind of done sentences that I'm reporting here. Bundeli, this were the so again we have a PPO stacked corpus and we have a tree bank, uh, which is not yet final, but then we don't have morph features annotated, we don't have parallel corpus for this. Avdi is even not so. We only have a PO stacked corpus, which one of my students worked for. during his MPhil, and nothing else. So which is kind of not good for from our perspective. The technologies, as we could see, we have POS taggers for every language other than Bundeli. So I'm still waiting for the data set to be annotated to build that POS tagger, but we'll soon have Bundeli POS tagger as well. As you could see, performance varies across languages, and there are various reasons. So less amount of data set. Also, so Maghi performance is disproportionately high, which is not a good thing. And it's high because our data set is very homogeneous. It doesn't cover all kinds of data. So that's why this high performance, we are trying to get more varied kinds of data set for this. Bhojpuri and Braj Bhasha are more the typical good POS taggers that you would know of. Avdi, we need probably more data for better tagger. Empty system, I cannot report the numbers because they're really too low, but we do have two phrase-based empty system for English Maghi and English Bhojpuri. For other languages, we don't even have the parallel data, sufficient parallel data to train even the phrase-based ones. Now, the last part is the speech resources that we are trying to build, and we have just started working on this Karya project, and it's a crowdsourcing platform that Microsoft Research has developed. We are using this, and they have it's meant to be used for language data tasks. So we're using this for collecting data for four languages as of now in our pilot. So Maghi, Brajbhasha, Bhojpuri, and Avdi. And the methodology of data collection is, so whatever speech data we have at this point of time, most of the Indian languages, they are mostly read speech. So people are called in the studios, and they are given a text to read, and then they read it, that's recorded. That's the kind of data that we have. What we wanted was a more at least comparatively more natural. So it's not really completely natural that we are collecting. So these are controlled field based. So this is an app. Karya is a mobile app. We install that in the mobile phones of the speakers, and they are given, so as in the field methods course, we give a questionnaire. So they are given this set of 400, 500 sentences. They are also given some prompts, some questions to which they have to respond. So those are our narrations, and also videos and pictures which they have to describe again, and they could record in their mobile itself, and it gets synced to the server, and we get the data. And more importantly, since it's a crowdsourced thing, so everyone who is participating in this, they get some remuneration for that. So the idea of Karya is to really help people in the low income group with some additional income, and we also get our data out of this. So it's just starting out, and we hope that we'll probably be able to do it with these languages, and then with more languages as well. So the whole idea of this is that there needs to be more rapid research and development, especially for the low resource and no resource languages. So the social NLP, yes, it's a problem. It's a hard problem, and but the challenges there are of different kinds. But when it comes to multilingual NLP, it needs to be a collaborative effort. And so as part of that, we so Panlingua and uh, a center, we have some collaboration at this point of time, and we are working on developing these resources that I just showed for each of these languages. And we are also offering, and these are not yet announced for various reasons, but consider this as one announcement. So we're offering internships for students who are interested in working on one of these languages or any of the other language which is non-scheduled and which do not have resources and which they would like to work on, and the internships for them. And uh, And if you're interested, so for winter internships it's November 30, likely to be extended because of COVID this year. For summer internships the deadline is April 30. And you could work with us for a month or 2 months, and kind of develop those resources, develop those technologies, learn certain things from us. And in the process we get building this data. So it's an effort at community building. Of course, I'm sorry for this if this looks like an advertisement, but if you are interested in working on any of these, then we also have started an MSc in computational linguistics this year. And the idea is to train students to work in these areas, and the deadline is not yet passed, so you could apply till 15th November if you're interested in that. All right, that's it. And thanks for your attention. And so you could contact me for if you are interested in the internship. Also, you could visit our GitHub page and the website for codes and resources and corpora. So most of these things that I talk about, they are on our GitHub page. Most of those certain things which are still under development, they'll be there in the next couple of months. And you could go get those from there as well and use it for your research. Okay, thank you very much. I hope I have not overshot by a long uh, time.
You haven't, Ritesh, Dr. Ritesh. Thank you so much for this very, very enlightening and very, very interesting talk. I'm sure we don't. Would if anyone wants to ask a question, you definitely can ask in the chat box. Although I have a few questions, but ma'am, would you like to start?
Uh, just want to, first of all, thank you very much, Ritesh, for such an informative talk and giving us a very different view of computational linguistics, what we understand. So, thanks a lot. Just a query. Can you tell us a little more about Karya?
Okay, Karya is a mobile application. It's an Android-based application, and so essentially what happens is that uh, we sort of present so we are using this for data collection at this point of time. So we give the uh, speakers this app, and they need to install this in their mobile. And then for at the time of installation they need to have internet connection. But after that, once everything is set up, our whole questionnaire is downloaded on their mobile. So at any given point of time, they could go there and select that I want to know record my translations, or anything that we ask them to record. And then they could the questions will come one by one. So one sentence will be there, they record it, they check it, they test it. If everything is fine, then they move on to the next sentence, and then move on to the next sentence. It's a very simple interface. And at the end of it, they need to sync it. So at that point of time also they'll need an internet connection. So they sync it with the server, the Microsoft server. And once all of this is complete, the good thing is that the data, the whole data that is collected, that is released publicly for everyone on GitHub. So once it's there, so it's not Microsoft property. Microsoft is giving us the tool and the server, but they essentially the data is public data. So in fact we are bound to release it. We cannot claim it to be non-public if it's so if it's collected via Karya. So abhi to as of now we are piloting the app. So and
Specifically designed for your project,
uh,
what I get.
sort of so if so for all kinds of pilots, different kinds of pilots, the apps gets tweaked for that specific task. So if say if you want to use the app, and if you have a different kind of need, related but slightly different kind of task, then the app we could tweak the app and give it to you for that. So it's not publicly released app as of now. So because once
Thank
the
you.
pilot gets done, then yeah.
Mhm.
But it's
Thank you.
available for researchers. I mean, if you want to use
Oh,
it, then yeah.
okay. Any other question? Yeah, Madhuri, over to you.
Question I have, this is a curiosity, in fact, more because your misogyny is one of the variables that you guys take, right?
Yeah.
From what I could understand. So,
Yeah.
aggression and misogyny, you have hypothesized, or you have seen that it goes together. Aggression, most of the aggression is almost always misogynistic. Most of the gendered aggression is almost always misogynistic. What I was wondering is that sometimes, for example, in the example that you showed in one of the slides, where it is said that she is a Pakistani agent and she's a Pakistani sleeper cell, etc. I'm guessing the aggression is not just misogynistic, but also has a religious color to it. So in those cases, do you also differentiate between the different kinds of aggression, or the different areas where the aggression may be coming from? So if yes, then how exactly do you go about it, and how exactly do you quantify it?
Yeah, so Madhuri, it's the other way around. So most of the misogynist comments are also aggressive. So
Acha. Okay, okay.
so yes, we also try and get at the other kinds of aggressive comments. At this point of time, we don't have the data for all of that, but within this project itself, we are actually looking at both the communal, the religious, and the misogynous, and also hopefully we'll have some interesting results how they interact with each other. You know how so as you noticed in the example itself, that it's an it actually doesn't really, we didn't think that it was misogynous, but it was definitely communal.
Mhm.
Right. So, and but also there are examples where misogyny and a lot of cases in Sabrimala incident, which I didn't mention here. So we got a lot of data from Sabrimala debate as well, and a lot of those examples are where communalism and misogyny, they interact and they intersect with each other, and it would be so. I don't have an answer at this point of time, but how do they interact? But yes, we do. So we have this taxonomy where we have different kinds of aggression, which includes both of these, and also so other one like the casteist and racist, and also based on political affiliation, based on the country of the person. So all these different kinds of aggression, yes, different locus of attack, what we call, is there in the taxonomy.
Thank you so much, Ritesh. I'm 100% sure there are so many different questions and so many things that I want to ask more, but unfortunately we are running out of time, and we have been yeah. And we'll definitely hope that you will come and talk to us again about this, because I'm sure there are so many questions that students also have regarding computational linguistics as a subject itself, and because sometimes we want to work in a particular field, but we always think, where do we begin? And that question, where do we begin, is always it always stumps a lot of people who probably could do a lot of good work, but because of the unavailability of information, I think that's at least and as far as I am concerned, I always think about where do I begin as far as computational linguistics is concerned. But thank you so much, Tesa, for doing this, and I'm sure the kind of work that you are doing is extremely important given today's time, and the fact that almost all of our communication is very quickly shifting online, and the identification of aggression, trolling, etc., is a must and should be done. And something like yours, if we have a machine in place, if we have a system in place which prevents such things and which safeguards people against bullying, I think that will be a huge deal. So thank you very much, Ritesha, for coming. Professor Sri Kumar sir, if you could extend the formal vote of thanks and end this evening.
Well, Ritesh, thanks. That was a wonderful talk. um, you are actually dealing with some of the most challenging tasks. Computational linguistics itself is quite a difficult enterprise, and moreover, you are dealing with modeling natural, social linguistic settings and so on. So that is quite a big challenging task. And your talk was quite interesting. Hope we have all got introduced to most of the issues that you are dealing with. We hope to hear from you later also on the same topics, and also the developments that your project is moving towards. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I would like to inform Ritesh, Dr. Ritesh, as well as everybody else listening, that Dr. Ritesh's talk was streamed live on our LU Linguistics YouTube channel, and it will be available if any one of you wants to go back and look at the things that he was talking about, look at the work that he has done, and especially the internship information and the information regarding opportunities to work with Ritesh, Dr. Ritesh's lab. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, ma'am. And thank you very much, Ritesh, for joining us. And thank you very much, all the students who have joined us here this evening. We will take your leave and we'll see you tomorrow again. Tomorrow's talk is at 11 a.m. We will be sending you the graphic and the creative that we have for the talk. And let's see you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.